Good afternoon. That's where I was today. That looks like Lake Barcroft in Fairfax County, Virginia, and took some some places along Old Dominion Trail in Arlington, and that's me. And then it's my book, and then um, so um, I want to talk about something a little bit that is a little bit disturbing today. I kind of want to to talk about the style I've used um, in communicating my content over the last, really since 1998, since I published the first book. And I um, actually have um, an outline here where I went through it in some detail. And when I was living in Minneapolis. I moved there in 1997, right there in the Churchill Apartments, and working for ING. And then we moved over to this building here. Everything was on the Skyway. It was all very convenient. And I worked there for 4.5 years, and then the layoff, and then had some other odd jobs before I came back. But I moved there. Um, I moved there because, transferred from Arlington, Virginia, which dealt where the employer dealt mainly with, in large part with military officers as customers, to the company that bought us in Minneapolis, which then was Northwestern National Life. Because we were concerned about a conflict of interest if I was going to write this book, which about gays in the military, that it would create an issue. And so I actually transferred within the company. I actually paid my own transfer expenses because of it. But that's what we did, and I lived there for 6 years. The book was published on July the 11th, 1997, with the printing of the first 400 copies or so, and then mailing the copies to the Library of Congress. And I started, when I got to Minneapolis, I was able to get it into book distributors, and I was able to sell copies from my from my print run, which kept in a locker. I was able to sell those within the first 2 years. And I, gave a couple of lectures, one at Hamline University, one at the University of Minnesota later. But I did start depending on posting things online, and this was about the time. 1996 was late 1996 was when AOL allowed you to FTP anything you wanted, and the introduction of Section 230, which gave platforms and later social media sites a lot, freedom from liability for what users posted to a large extent. The copyright's a little bit different. That's a little more complicated. That was um, digital millennium copyright and everything. But generally, the law was set up to make it possible for individuals to post what they wanted online and have others find it with search engines. And that's what I took very heavy advantage of. And I sort of have an outline here of what all the history was over the years. But the point was, it was very simple with search engine arguments, particularly about the topics I was concerned about, which was gays in the military, and the whole argument about forced intimacy, people living together in a dorm or on a ship, for example, and the possibility which was raised at the time about sexual attraction and everything, and would that be a distraction? And it turned out we got used to it, and finally the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy was announced had been announced in 1993, and was finally rescinded in 2010. And actually, the rescission is still in effect. HagSouth is not actually changed that as far as I know. He's with trans, it's different, but he's not actually done anything about that policy that I'm aware of. And I started as I developed my websites, and I had two of them. Um, People could just find me very easily with search engines. I didn't even have to pay for it. Google searched everything, and I started getting lots of hits. And then there was an attempt, the Communications Decency Act, which had housed Section 230, the censorship portion was struck down. But they tried to bring it back with the Child Online Protection Act. And it went to the Supreme Court twice, and then finally was struck down in a bench trial in Philadelphia in 2007. But that basically said that basically made it legally safe for people like me to say what I wanted online, as long as it wasn't obscene, or as long as it wasn't just specifically pornographic, which it wasn't. So the whole thing was that I could put ideas online of what I thought about things, and I branched into talking about a lot of other topics that maybe minors weren't ready to learn about yet, but it, um, but they weren't pornographic. There wasn't. It was perfectly legal to do that. To try to stop me to do it from doing that, according to the COPA opinion, I couldn't be forced to age verify and everything then, because the technology was considered too restrictive. And so for all these years, this continued. Now I left Minneapolis in um, 2003 and came back to live with my mother, who had had coronary bypass surgery in 1999, and now she was turning 90. And that was the house, and in Arlington, Virginia. And the concern was, I was no longer working steadily, but I did work as a substitute teacher, and also graded papers. There were some issues with my substitute teaching, with disciplining students. That's one thing, and I could have done more about that. But eventually, one of my posts created a problem in 2005, and it's a long story how it did. And I stopped subbing for a while and then went back to it, but finally stopped again. And I also considered other kinds of employment. Some of them were mundane things, like mail carrier, like I said, or I got calls to become a life insurance agent. Well, from Humana and from New York Life, and I actually looked at that in 2005. Well, what would I be doing? I would be a huckster, calling people to sell them things. There were other jobs around, like trying to call people to convert whole life to term. That was one idea. There were all kinds of things around in that decade when I was living at home with mother, and she died in 2010. But of course, there was, maybe this was a little risky. I could attract danger to the house if people didn't like me, or when I was doing something, getting a lot of it, I was getting a fair amount of attention online for my views about gays in the military. And the attention I was getting, I think, did help with eventually convincing Congress to overturn Don't Ask, Don't Tell in 2010. But that was almost the same time my mother died. Almost the same weekend she went to hospice and then passed away in December of 2014 of 2010. And then I lived in the house for myself for 6 years, and then sold it in 2017 and moved into a condo that you see me in right now, see me in sitting here. right now in these interviews. Um, and I've been here for 8 years, I think, and through the pandemic and everything. But my method of doing things was very simple, very primitive. Just simply let people find me on search engines. And in 2000, as you know, that in around 2011, smartphones started coming into use, and the major social media sites started becoming much more aggressive and started using algorithms. Of course, you know that there's an argument about teenagers being addicted by the algorithms, and the whole shred. People found that they could make money, make a living on YouTube by attracting sponsors or attracting Patreon or selling ad space from ads. And I didn't really try to do that. I didn't try to run a formal business. I simply did this reporting it as a proprietorship. I did not even set up a separate LLC or anything. With even though I had in 2014, in 2013, I actually wrote the third book, which was a lot more personal. And then, as you know, recently I've decided to add the discussion, to update it with gender ideology and update it particularly with the concerns about age verification. And I've got I'm very concerned that with all the changes, particularly the concern about age issues and how convoluted that's gotten, but it could be done much more simply and reliably if basically operating systems take over the most of the responsibility and make it easy for us to do. And that's probably what will happen. In fact, the Californians passed a law like that for 2027. But it's likely to the way things are going, it's likely that people won't be allowed to have their own sites or post a lot of their own content online just because they want to, without a commercial purpose or without some commercial viability. I actually made a video about that called A Dangerous Thought Experiment back in 2018. And I've shown that numerous times. And it's likely that with all the problems that are going on with internet law right now, that we won't have the freedom to do the kinds of things the way I did them in the future, the way we used to, the way I did it myself with no business, simply putting it out there and letting people find it. And that turned out to be effective for me for a couple of reasons. One, the issue was unusual. The issue was unusually sensitive and provocative, and intimacy, physical intimate or personal intimacy within a confined space, whether a college dorm when I was thrown out of William and Mary or whether in the military. Or now, that same concept is ventured into gender ideology, as you know, with the battles over bathrooms and everything in high schools and all the stuff that's going on. And the whole idea that if you talk about gender identity, you can present it in schools to kids in a way that when you can't talk about sex itself, at least until they're old enough to have taken biology. So the whole thing got very politicized, and the politicization of it was over the past few years, particularly visible after the pandemic was winding down in 2021 and 2022 is when I started feeling it. And also, I was concerned about the way I was doing things, just putting it out there for free, not really having a business like everyone else did, that might not, be allowable forever. So in 2022, at the start of 2022, and I had promised to do this in the start of 2019, I did take down a lot of my blogs. I'd used Blogger and Google Blogger for 16 years and had 4 WordPress blogs. I took a lot of them down and also only used my legal name. I didn't use my nickname anymore. even though I use it as for my books. I call myself author Bill Bushka, but John W. Bushka or author Bill Bushka. I don't call myself Bill Bushka anymore. And I only use the doaskdotell name online for presenting the books. I don't use it to post my opinions about things anymore. I only post my opinions on my blog, which is named after John W. Bushka. I think I can get to that pretty quickly. And that's one of my sites just named after me. And then the blog, I even posted today, posted a couple of a review, talked about Caitlin Robertson's films today. I have lots of views. I have views. I don't get a lot of views like I used to, but it's I got hacked when I tried to keep this on my old provider in 2022, so I had to move it all directly to WordPress. That's another thing that happened. So I've attracted a lot of controversy doing things the way I have, which, you may be competing with people who have to do it for a living. And when I have inheritance and access to inherited funds, that seems unfair. I'm not, I was kind of taken care of, but the way I'm doing things doesn't provide wealth going forward. It's just simply depleting the family. I didn't have children, so there's nothing to follow me, into the future. And I'm going to talk about that aspect of my younger years in another video. Could I really have had children, or could I have had a different career than I did? I'm going to talk about some critical things that happened in my youth in the next video that will be interesting. It's there'll be some surprises. I think it's not the usual things you usually hear. And, but basically the whole issue of whether, I should be expected. This is the other big point I wanted to get into, that rather than speaking for myself and be separated from everyone else, I should be willing to join groups, to join established nonprofits and let them speak for me. And nonprofits are among my beneficiaries, but I've not worked with them directly. HRC is one of the beneficiaries that I put on there in 2012, but since I haven't worked with them directly, because I have so many concerns about the involvement of some of the issues, some of the way trans rights has been interpreted. That's another thing, that the trans community needs help now. There's a perception that the gay community doesn't. So the gay community owes the trans community something as having where the need is. But actually, gay men could get in trouble again if we start having the governments or insurance companies want to withdraw support for PrEP or something, which is one of the things that prevents HIV. We could have our problems again too in the future. But yeah, the whole idea that because I myself was not a competitive person enough to have a family and my own children, and that I should see myself as a part of a minority group and function as part of a group and function and respect the whole world, consider the world a power struggle, and allow oppressed people to be proud of their oppression, the left, the way the left thinks. And you can be proud of your identity with what you do with it. But I have a problem with believing that your identity in public, what you're known for, necessarily has to be gendered at all. You can just be your biological sex. And it's like on your driver's license and passport and everything. And let it be at that, and be known as a writer, be known for what you do, and not have think of what you do with your life, or even your performativities in life, as having to be gendered. That's the idea, the whole idea that that one is a member of this other, has this specific gender identity, you can't question it. One of the things that the also left tried to do would make it so it's so put into the law that the idea of self ID is can't be questioned, and if you question it, that's hate speech. They tried to even take it that far. They collectivize it so much. When what I think you should do is look at an individual when somebody is a speaker and has been prolific in speaking like I have. You should look at my record as an individual. How credible am I to be a speaker? And there are problems. Did I pay my dues? I could have. I sort of messed up the substitute teaching, and maybe I never could have done it because with the issues I had dealt with publicly. Or somebody approached me about being a tax preparer in 2008. And that's a tough job. You've got to really get everything right. That's a real profession to become. But if I did something that was more legitimate publicly, I would have to stop my online activities and simply support organizations and say what they tell me to say, and not be critical of things myself with my own mind, because I think there are flaws in the things they were doing, which I think a lot of us understand. The gender ideology has a lot of controversy associated with it, moral controversy. So my fourth book unpacks all of that, which I went over in the last video. And then the problem is, should I be the person if I earned the right to be the person who unpacks it and ruins it for everybody else or something? And when, I could have paid my dues more. I could have had a menial job like everybody else, become a letter carrier, or I could have done the tax preparer thing, or if I had sold life insurance, I could have tried to become an agent or something. But that was before 2008, and you all know what happened in 2008. That our economy had become so hucksterized with people trying to sell, because everybody thinking they had to be a salesman, which I didn't want to be. I wanted to be a critical thinker, and not a salesman. But you saw the economy collapse in 2008 because everybody was turning into a huckster. And so was this right, what I did, or not? But it's true, I could have, in this period when I was living with my mother and had the benefit of her financial stability, which was quite considerable, that it wasn't as fair to other people, that I didn't have to take on the menial jobs or deal with the job market the way they have to. And so, maybe this is not right. This might not be permitted as much in the future as it has been, is my point. And so, I am concerned. I like to speak for myself. I don't like to let others, even organizations, take over my speech and expect me to join them and let them speak for me when I can speak for myself. And I've never tolerated, in my old age, I don't want to join anything. I understand the join or die idea, but I don't want to join anything at the end of my life. I want to be, when I pass away, I'm 82 now, I want to have been respected as an individual, not somebody who gave in to being forced to join things. But that's a luxury not everybody has, So I understand the moral point. I hope that I've gotten that across clearly here. And so, the next time I'll talk more about some controversies earlier in my life and where this all came from. But this period when particularly after I was laid off in Minneapolis and from ING, and no longer in the IT job market, with the the mainframe IT job market also collapsed somewhat. And I covered that in my third book, I think. I covered that in this book. So, I wasn't really kind of dependent on mother for financial stability to be able to do this. And that isn't really good in the grand scheme of things. But I just wanted to talk about that. And the next time I'll talk about my earlier background a little bit more, which I think there'll be some other interesting points to come out. And I do thank you for listening.